equity and inclusion and education initiatives, which include the Most Promising Multicultural Students Program, the Mosaic Awards, HBCUs for advertising, the National Student Advertising Competition, Ad Camp, Campus to Corporate Internship Program, and many of the organization's thought leadership initiatives. She was promoted to Vice President of the AAF's Mosaic Center and Education Services in 2018. And Ayanna's career has been steeped in advertising, sales, and marketing at the world's leading publications. During her time at the Washington Post, she worked in both advertising and marketing. She left the nation's capital to lend her talents to the New York Times advertising department, supporting various ad verticals. And she was promoted to department store account manager, overseeing several of the nation's top consumer brands. She received the New York Times Presidential Circle Award for excellence in sales achievement across all print, digital, and mobile advertising platforms. And before relocating back to the Washington, D.C. area, she was account manager for Cox Media Group in Atlanta. However, it's the work that she does at the AAF that she's most proud of. Being able to help others who may not otherwise have opportunities afforded their peers is her mission, both professionally and personally. And Ayanna received a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Louisiana Lafayette and a certificate in public relations from New York University. And Ayanna, I'm gonna open it up to you and can't wait to hear about the conversation.
Thank you so much, Erin. After hearing that bio, I realize I need to condense it. But thank you all for being here, and thank you, Erin and team, for having me. When I was initially asked to speak at this luncheon, the ask was to talk about the Mosaic Center and its mission and its programming. And I thought, well, that could take about 15 minutes, maybe 20 if I stretched it, or I could just literally send you guys the link to the website. And then you would know all you needed to know about diversity and inclusion and how to make your workplace more inclusive and how to end racial injustice and unite political parties and end homelessness and all that wonderful stuff. Okay, don't go to the website looking for that because you won't find all of that. But when I thought about the current climate that we're in, I wanted to have a very open and honest and uncomfortable at times conversation that's long overdue. The conversation, quite frankly, is why there even needs to be programming and organizations that are developed just so that people can be treated fair and just. So think about that for a second. There literally has to be something created so that people that look like me and some of you can be given an equal shot, a fair shot. Have any of you ever really thought that that's a problem? Because across the board, that should just exist. So, and here's where the conversation is really going to become a little bit uncomfortable. Because for some people, equality feels like oppression to those in power. If someone has always had power and now are being asked to share, not to give it up, just to share some of it with others, then they feel like they're having less. And that's one of the bigger challenges in creating inclusivity in the workplace. So as I was thinking about how I wanted to frame this conversation, I thought about the times I've experienced unconscious bias, prejudice, or just even blatant racism. And the title, When Was Your Moment?, came to me when I reflected on those times and how they directly correlate to the work that we do in the Mosaic Center. So in this conversation, and I call it a conversation and not a presentation because I want it to be interactive. I want you to chime in with your own stories if you have them, with your own when was your moments. But I'll be sharing my moments and the moments of others that have shared them with me. And my hope is that by hearing these stories from someone like me, instead of from TV or media or social that they're not so abstract and they are made more real. And I want you to share your stories, or stories from those that you've known that have been affected in some way as we're going through the conversation. And for some of you, this may be your when was your moment, this conversation today, and that's okay. I mean, we have to start somewhere. So throughout the conversation, I'm going to tie in a story or tie in stories that tie into the Mosaic Principles. And the Mosaic Principles are the foundation of everything we do in the Mosaic Center. They focus on recruiting for a more inclusive workplace, professional development and leadership of diverse talent, supplier diversity, recognition of diverse talent, and the portrayal of multifaceted, non-stereotypical images in media and advertising. So just going to jump right into the principles and my moments. So Mosaic Principle number 1 states that we must recruit to develop an inclusive industry. So one Saturday morning, about 2.5 months ago, I received an email from one of my most promising multicultural alum inductees. And she wasn't asking for anything. She just wanted to share a story with me. And she had been finding it challenging to get callbacks for job interviews. And she knew it was because of her name. Her name is indicative of her background or her ethnicity. So she decided to shorten her first name so that it was less obvious what her ethnicity was. And sure enough, she started to get callbacks. But she felt ashamed that she even had to do that. And so she changed her name back on her resume to her birth name. And that was my moment when I realized personally that I wasn't by myself, because to be completely transparent, I joke about this all the time. Ayanna Jackson, you know who I am when you see my name on a resume. I'm like, I'm lucky I ever got a job. But I was like, okay, I'm not the only one who's felt this way. So I want to ask the group, has any one of you ever considered your name as a barrier just in getting an interview?
No.
No, that's not even something you have to think about. And Ayanna Jackson, or the young lady who sent me the email, it is something, as we're sending out our resumes, we have to consider. Another when was my moment relates to ageism. And I don't think that's talked about enough, but I saw that to see it firsthand was eye-opening. So at one of my former organizations, they started to want their team to look a certain way. And that look was attractive, white, and young. And even for the people of, because they still would bring people of color, but even the people of color were young and attractive. I mean, these people they looked like they stepped off of a Ralph Lauren campaign. They were gorgeous. But that transition started to happen as I was getting ready to leave. And I would go back and visit from time to time. And I ran into one of my former colleagues, and she was a middle-aged Black woman. And over the years, she'd grown these long, beautiful locks. And when I saw her during my last visit, she had on a wig, and it was a straight wig that gave her a more youthful appearance. And she did that because she felt that that was one way she could potentially secure her job. I went to go visit another colleague, a former colleague, during that same visit, and she was at her desk and she was putting on her face. I mean, she's beating it. She's got the lipstick, the powder, she's getting all dolled up. And so I asked, I'm like, oh, are you going on a client call? And she said, oh, no, I'm going to a staff meeting. I'm like, you have to do all that for a staff meeting? And she was like, yeah, unfortunately now these days we do. So these are instances where people who are seasoned professionals, they know what they're doing, they've done really well by the company, they feel they have to change who they are in order to secure their jobs. This was a moment that I realized that ageism really existed, and to see it blatantly in front of my face was just astounding. Have any of you ever experienced anything like that?
I haven't experienced it, but I did have a friend who, you know, young, but had gray hair, just prematurely gray. And she's like, well, if I decide to go look for another job, I'm going to have to color my hair. And I was like, well, why? And she's like, they're going to think I'm older. They're not going to, once they meet me, they're not going to hire me. And that wasn't even on my radar that somebody would do that.
Exactly. And it's a real thing. I mean, I know that people now on LinkedIn, they take the year they graduated from college off of their profiles so that people won't know how old they are. And so, speaking of the hairstyle thing, I don't know if you all knew this, but in 2019, laws were passed or proposed in different cities and states that banned policies that penalized people of color for wearing their hair in its natural state, whether it was natural curls or dreadlocks or afro or braids, but any style that embraced their cultural identity, and it's called the Crown Act. So again, I want you to think about that. There had to be a law passed to say that someone can't discriminate against me because of the way the hair grows out of my head. Has anyone ever experienced that, or even knows anyone that has experienced any type of discrimination?
Unfortunately, in the state of Nebraska, it still hasn't passed yet. It was just on the ballot, and this is in this common, climate, and it still couldn't get passed.
Wow, that's amazing. So
I don't know anyone, but I think part of the problem is that a lot of people didn't realize that was a thing, because I remember hearing about how that was, laws were being passed so that was no longer acceptable, and I thought, where was that acceptable? I think so many things have just slid under the radar for so long that it's like crazy.
Nope, absolutely. So it's people were able to get away with it. And I think because of the climate that we're in, now it's being addressed. I mean, you're telling me that the way my natural hair looks is not nice, or it's not the standard of beauty that people are accustomed to, or it's not professional. And so, all of these stories aren't going to be all doom and gloom. I am going to give you some considerations to take away as we're going through this conversation. And so for principle one in recruiting for a more diverse and inclusive workplace, you have to prevent these types of incidents from happening. In order to do that, several processes have to be put in place. And I'm just going to give you a few. For example, the blind resume review can help to prevent a story like the one of the most promising student. Again, and I say this all the time, it's unfortunate that that even has to exist, that you have to remove the person's name and just look at their merit, because the person reviewing it may have some type of bias and won't even consider that person just based on their name and what they perceive to be, whatever they perceive it to be. And then also make sure your organization requires a diverse slate of candidates when considering new hires. And I don't just mean diversity in terms of ethnicity, but in terms of sexual orientation, in terms of gender, in terms of being differently abled, and most importantly, in age. Because I feel like that's not something that's being talked about, and it exists. So again, those are just a few items that you guys can consider as you're taking these, tips or gems back to your office, or just something to consider in general. So now I'm going to move on to Mosaic Principle number 2, and that states that we must provide greater access to professional development and leadership. So in terms of development, how many of you are familiar with the organization Add Color? Cool. I know
I am now. You told me about it earlier today.
Right. For those of you who don't have your cameras on, you can do your little reactions with the hands up, thumbs up. There you go. Perfect. For those of you who aren't, Add Color was founded by Omnicom Group's Chief Diversity Officer and most promising alum, Tiffany R. Warren. And the organization, it creates a community of diverse professionals, and it allows individuals to celebrate their accomplishments, but most importantly, for companies to recognize individuals with unique personalities and perspectives, and for organizations not to see people just as quotas, but as assets with smart, new, brilliant ideas. And so at my first Add Color, I thought it was great. I never seen such a diverse I never attended such a diverse conference. I'm like, these people sure get it right. But then after my second and my third and so on and so forth, I realized I was seeing the same faces, and many were people of color. And I realized also that we're talking to each other. The people that need to hear it, they're not here. The people that were there, we already know what the problems are. We have the solutions, but we need the people that aren't here and don't know to show up. And that's because the content at Add Color can serve as a catalyst for professional development, and it creates awareness, and that benefits, it creates awareness in the benefits of diversity and inclusion, and diversity of thoughts and diversity of ideas. So that helps to develop your staff, your talent, and just overall benefit the organization itself. But then also, principle number 2 focuses on leadership. And this is going to be a short story, but it was a life-changing story for me, because I'd been at my job for about 13 years, and I love my job, I love my clients, I love my boss, I love my brand, I love everything about it. But one day we had a town hall meeting, and all the senior leadership that was on stage, no one looked like me. And there was no person of color. There wasn't even like a white sister up there. And it was all male, it was all white. And I'm like, It made me think about all the years I'd been at the company, and there had been one person of color in a senior management position. And that's not senior leadership, just a management position in the department that I worked in. But there would be no one listed on their senior leadership page. And that's when I realized that it was time for me to go. And I started my exit plan, because as much as I love my job, if I couldn't see myself advancing in that job, then there was no place for me there. And it didn't bode well for my future. And so a few considerations to think about in terms of, providing professional development opportunities and leadership opportunities for diverse talent is make sure your company assigns funds in their conference budget to attend diversity and inclusion conferences, because you will network with other diverse people. You will learn so much about different cultures and their own unique sensitivities. And that will help you as, a creative or a strategist. Think about other people and other people's sensitivities. And then regarding leadership, make sure your company has a process to promote multicultural talent to senior positions. Because, and this goes back to retention, if you don't see yourself in these senior roles, you will not keep those, you will not keep that multicultural talent. We have so many partners who tell us what, you know, we know Most Promising has been in existence for 25 years, and you have had some of the best come through, and now they're mid to senior talent. We need them because we can't retain them. Well, you can tap into, you know, the Most Promising alum, but if you're not creating a culture that makes them feel that they can be their authentic selves and that there's room for advancement, then you won't be able to keep them. So that's just something that, you know, to consider. So Mosaic principle number 3. This has to do with supplier diversity or creating fair business practices. And when was my moment for this one was April 21st, 2020. So that was only a few months ago. And it was a moment that I fully understood what supplier diversity was and the challenges that exist for diverse vendors. Before I came to the AAF, I will tell you that I had not even heard the term supplier diversity. So first of all, how many of you know what supplier diversity is? See? Okay, there's one. Okay, so now I don't feel bad. Whew. So supplier diversity programs encourages organizations to use minority-owned, women-owned, LGBTQ-owned, differently abled-owned, veteran-owned businesses as suppliers. And so on April 21st of this year, one of our partners whose background is steeped in supplier diversity explained to me the importance of their programs and the challenges that exist. And there are several reasons that it's important. The supplier diversity programs and their professionals are literally able to manage dire events like a pandemic, if you will. And then also because of potential trade wars, corporations will need to develop vendors to reduce relying on offshore vendors. So they can keep everything domestic if they relied on these diverse suppliers. But these groups are, you know, they're geared up and they're poised, they're trained, and they're uniquely equipped to bring skills and knowledge to different organizations if just given a chance. And also, and this is important for the company, a company who really is invested in supplier diversity, it shows their commitment to its initiatives and it displays their dedication to doing business with multicultural companies. And that also shows that they're committed to the economic growth of all communities. And one hears about supplier diversity and you think, oh, let's all support supplier diversity programs, but that's not happening. And a few issues are the supplier diversity professionals have a hard time building relationships with the decision makers because the decision makers want to do business with people that look like them. And then in advertising, unless a brand specifically tells their agency that this is important to them and they make a specific request, the agency probably won't even consider it. My supplier diversity partner explained that before I came to the AAF, they used to have different initiatives regarding supplier diversity. We had a supplier fair at our AdMerica conference many years ago. And unfortunately, the minority-owned businesses didn't feel the value of the fair because they weren't getting genuine engagement. Like people would take their cards and they would talk to them, and that's where the conversation would end, quite frankly. And for me, the most egregious, hurtful, and quite frankly, it just made me really angry, is that there are cases where contractors have been charged with impersonating minority businesses in order to get contracts. So states set aside funds to support minority-owned businesses. And so these contractors who are already getting the lion's share of business purposefully engage in illegal acts to take from minority-owned businesses who are struggling just to get a foot in the door. And so, again, reference my point about the equality oppression, because you already have so much. These smaller businesses are just trying to get a foot in the door, and you're taking advantage of them. And so when you get a moment, and Erin, I didn't give you a link for this, but I want you guys to write this down because I want you to look it up when you get a second, because I just learned about this myself. New York's Eastern Building and Restoration. New York's Eastern Building and Restoration. They're now defunct, as well they should be, but they were charged with receiving contracts for impersonating minority-owned businesses from 2012 to 2014. And if you look it up, you'll see a photo of the mastermind behind the scheme. And then there's also a photo of one of the people who he had taken advantage of impersonating as her business. And yes, and she was an elderly Black woman. She looked like she could have been my grandmother or one of my friends' grandmother. He financially ruined this woman. And again, he goes to the judge and says, you know, I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. And the judge said, that's exactly what you meant to do. And so have you guys ever thought about how these small businesses, minority owned, whether it's, you know, ethnicity, women, whatever the marginalized business is, how they have to fight to compete for these contracts where you have these larger contractors out there, you know, taking most of the business, and not only taking, but preventing them from being a part of the RFP. You've never had to think about it, but it exists, it's happening. And that's why supporting supplier diversity programs is so important. So if you are in a position, and I don't know the makeup of everyone attending, but if you're in a position, make sure your organization formally incorporates supplier diversity into its strategic plan. Because if it's incorporated into the business strategy, then there's going to be goals assigned to it. There's going to be measurement, evaluation, and there's going to be expectations assigned to the programs. Also, make sure your organization's supplier database consists of diverse suppliers. That's kind of a no-brainer if you want to have some diversity within your vendor database. And then I probably should have started off with this one, but understand that it's not about affirmative action, that it's about action that's affirmative. You're affirming that these businesses are viable solutions to your, whatever your needs may be, and they just need to be given a chance. And it's so funny because, like I said, I just found out about supplier diversity, and now it's like it's very close to my heart at this point. So moving on, Mosaic Principle number 4, we must recognize the diversity of talent within the industry. And this moment was my former boss's moment, because she was attending a conference, a very well-known conference, and she saw that a lot of the speakers on the panels, they all look the same. and that if there was a person of color on the panel, they were talking about diversity and inclusion. And here's a question for you guys. When you attend any conference or lately any panels or webinars, do you think about the makeup of the people that are leading the discussion?
I would say for me personally, I probably would now, but I probably would not have even thought about it a few months ago, if I'm being really honest.
No, and that's what we want. That is absolutely what we want. People to be honest, because we can't get past any of the issues that we have until we have these open and honest conversations. But we, again, people that look like me or certain demographics, we think about it all the time because we know really smart people that are in the same, in the same space or have the same knowledge and experience that they're talking about on stage and not given an opportunity. And so another moment, and this is kind of funny and sad at the same time, and you guys may have heard about this one, but during Ad Week 2018, there was an all-white panel addressing the lack of diversity. And there's a few issues with this. Clearly, the lack of ethnic diversity on a panel about diversity. So there's that. But the panel itself was entitled CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, but they didn't have any ethnic representation. So it begs a question, could they not find a diverse CEO to participate in the panel? In all of whole New York, they couldn't find, of any other place, you couldn't find a diverse CEO. Or did you intentionally not include one? And one participant acknowledged, and I quote, "It's something that we need to work on," end quote. So how hard is it to work on, like I said, finding a CEO in the whole New York City to participate in this panel? So it also goes back to principle number 2 regarding development and having all staff, not just ethnic talent, to attend DE&I conferences, but senior leadership should also be attending. I'd asked about who had heard of Ag Color. Has any, the ones of you that have heard of Ag Color, have you ever attended? Yes, we got one. Thank you, Kevin. Having senior, not only having your employees attend, but having your senior leadership show up shows that they are genuinely committed to making their work culture more inclusive. There's so many open and candid conversations that can prove to be beneficial to an organization that really wants to embrace diversity, and no one really does it better than Ag Color. I see that someone said that they wanted to attend this year, but they couldn't. They do have, depending on, it was free this year for some of the sessions, and depending on if you bought a package, you can get unlimited access until December 31st. So if you are able to, I highly encourage you to, try to tap into some of that content. It was amazing. It was only supposed to be 3 days, and they added a 4th day. So that speaks to the impact of how successful this conference was. And I happened to be on vacation. And so on the 4th day, they added speakers. And a lot of people will say in this, virtual day and age that nobody's going to want to attend a conference and sit in front of their computer for an entire day of conference content. I was there from 10:30 until 4 o'clock. It was that engaging. Now I will say Ag Color gets some very heavy hitters to take part in their content, but it's definitely something, if you have an opportunity to attend. And like I was saying, it shows, if your leadership is also there, it shows that they are committed to changing the culture and changing the scope of what their organization looks like. So some considerations about, about principle number 4 in recognizing the diversity of talent. Because of the lack of diversity in these panels and conferences, the AAF's Mosaic Center has created our Apex Multicultural Speakers Bureau. And Erin, I'm gonna ask if you would, oh, I didn't send you that link. I'll have to send you guys that link. I'll send you the link, and Erin, you can do it, or you can go to the AF website. We just launched it today. The Multicultural Speakers Bureau allows organizations to tap into multicultural speakers who can speak on a myriad of topics and not just D&I issues. So I'll make sure you guys get that link. And then also, sorry, you guys. Make sure your organization has representation at these D&I conferences. I can't say that enough. You learn so much. I learned so much about other, other groups and the challenges that they face. It's just an amazing conference. And so last but not least, our 5th Mosaic principle is focusing on imagery. And it states that we must encourage multifaceted, non-stereotypical images of multicultural communities. So, unfortunately, systemic racism exists, and it's pervasive in all industries and basic everyday life. And in advertising and media, it's of the utmost importance for us to create images that depict all communities fair and non-stereotypical. It's important because it helps to mold the perceptions of how people view different demographics. And here's a question for you. How many of you outside of work engage with people that are not in your same demographic, whether it's ethnicity, LGBTQ, differently, okay, great. Because I have a lot of really amazing friends who are not within my demographic. I vacation with them. I go to brunch with them. These are friends. These are not just acquaintances. These are people that are my friends. And so when everything was happening, they reached out to me to see how I was feeling with all the social unrest that was going on. And so I know who my real friends are. But if people don't engage with certain demographics and all they get, the perception that they get is from what they see in media and advertising, then that helps to create a false narrative about an entire group of people. So in 2017, we conducted a survey on the perception of African-American women in media and advertising. And one of the questions, or one of the responses one of the questions prompted the response of the top 3 adjectives used to describe African-American women based on media and advertising. And those top 3 responses were that they were lazy, argumentative, and corrupt. This is what people think about me this is what some people may think about me when they see me based on what they see in media. Lazy, argumentative, and corrupt. So it's hurtful. I was surprised. The people that I tell this to are always surprised. So in addition to creating these perceptions, it also affects behaviors towards groups. It gives people like Amy Cooper carte blanche to call the police and say an African-American man is threatening her life. And these people work in human resources, they work in banks, they work in education, they work in the medical field. And they're making decisions with these biases that they have that's literally affecting people's lives. And and this one just came to me, and I'm sorry, I have to read this from a text because this just came to me last night because one of my friends knew I was working on this presentation or this conversation, if you will. And this gentleman on LinkedIn reached out to someone at a magazine and asked, "Are you healing the white employees as well in your magazine?" And then the person that responded said, "Hi, can you please expound?" And the gentleman is a white gentleman, he said, "Yes, there are millions of white people who are tired as well. There are grieving network groups at my companies dealing with the unintended consequences of Black Lives Matter. The group I worked with yesterday was made up of many executives and spouses and military and law enforcement people who are disgusted with the knee-jerk reactions and pressure they're feeling from their boards to hire unqualified Blacks in big jobs." The pressure they're feeling to hire unqualified Blacks in big jobs. There's so much to unpack there, but it kind of goes back to a lot of what I said. Now, this person who sent this email, he's a coach, he's a life coach now, but prior to that, he's worked with major corporations in hiring, he was in a hiring position. And so this is someone who someone like me would have to potentially go through. So again, it speaks to, making sure that the people in your organization don't have these unconscious bias. And sometimes I don't know, they don't put it on their resumes that they have these biases. So that's something that I don't know how to quite tackle, but I just wanted to share that with you because I was, at that point, I was like, I'm going to sleep. I don't know what else to do at this point. But another aha moment, and this happened last year, and it's kind of sad and funny at the same time, but Kellogg's was called out for their corn pops imagery on the back of their box. And so in 2017, the brand was called out because the back of the box showed an image of the little corn pops. Everybody knows what Kellogg's corn pops are, right? Right, yellow cereal, love them, full of sugar, whatever. But they showed several little corn pops at a shopping mall, and the corn pops are doing their shopping mall thing and they're whooping it up, and it was like super cute. But there was one brown corn pop on the creative, and the brown corn pop was a janitor. Okay, so first of all corn pops are yellow. If you get a brown corn pop, that's a problem because they're all supposed to be yellow. And then two, they literally created a non-existent corn pop image to make him the janitor. And so the guy that called him out actually happened to work for Marvel Comics. He's a writer. And so he was just having breakfast with his son. And, you're sitting there and you're looking at the back of the box and you see this. How do you reconcile that? And so Kellogg's was like, issue their cookie cutter statement. We don't mean to offend anyone. We're going to have it replaced. And they did that. But let's talk about why it was done. Who was the person that said, let's stick a brown corn pop in and make him a janitor? That's the bigger issue. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So considerations for addressing stereotypical imagery is make sure your organizations have make thoughtful decisions when they're producing culturally competent messages. not the brown corn pops decision. That's bad. Make sure they're being thoughtful about this. And then make sure you not only have diverse voices at the table, but they feel empowered to speak up. Because sometimes in the past, they may have spoken up and their ideas or their thoughts have been glossed over. And so they don't feel as though they have the power to speak up or that their voices are going to be heard. So they don't say anything. Cue the Pepsi Cola debacle about 4 or 5 years ago. And then make sure your organization has industry craft training. So most companies have DE&I training or unconscious bias training. That's great. But for the creatives, they need to be aware of certain sensitivities within, different groups. And so there's a different level of training for them so that these corn pops or Pepsi or H&M or Joe Malone, I don't know if you guys have heard about the Joe Malone scandal, but read it. They took the Black actor from Star Wars who literally created an act that was about his life. He created it, he starred in it, and they took a Chinese actor and placed him in the commercial for it to air in China. And so needless to say, this actor has severed ties with Joe Malone. But again, make sure that the people who are creating the content are aware of certain sensitivities of certain demographics. So now that I've gone through the Mosaic Principles and I've provided my moments and some of you have shared your moments, or had an opportunity to even think about certain moments, I hope the conversation has at the least caused you to think about how issues impact, other groups and empathize with them. And then at the most, take action and become an advocate in a real, meaningful way. Because the reality is, and again, here's where the conversation becomes a little bit difficult. The American system wasn't created for marginalized groups. It just wasn't. It is what it is. But the people that it was built for, they benefit from it, whether they realize it or not. And so for those of you asking, what can I do to affect change in a real positive way? I would say number one, being a part of this conversation today is a start. You knew what the topic was, you knew what it was going to be about, and you showed up, you didn't shy away from it. So that's a step in the right direction. Also, you have to re-educate yourself. There's so much history that's led us to where we are now in this nation. How many of you even knew or had even heard of Juneteenth before this year?
I had, because it was on my calendar, but I didn't know what it was.
Exactly.
Like it just showed up on my calendar, but I didn't know what it was until this year. Right.
And there's so many other instances like that, like the Tuskegee experiment or Black Wall Street. And if you don't know about these things, don't feel bad, because I know I wasn't taught a lot of these things growing up, and I'm a Black person. Admittedly, I didn't know about Juneteenth until my later years. So you have to consume content that serves to educate if you really want to, to make change and be a real advocate. At the height of the civil unrest of this year, the Mosaic Center received so many requests for resources on what people can do. Like, how can I help? What can I do to be better? What can I give my employees? What can I do myself to personally learn more? And so we created, in conjunction with our corporate members, we created the Mosaic Center's Commit to Change Resource Hub. And I do have that link. If Erin, if you have that and can drop chat, that would be great. And so The resource hub consists of content that addresses social issues like, you know, some of the organization's own internal issues that they're doing to address social injustice, different panel discussions you can watch, shows or movies that, you know, are intended to educate, and books and articles that are also intended to educate. And then also be comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. There is literally a YouTube channel called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And it was created by a former NFL linebacker, Emmanuel Aiko, who started the online series to give white people a non-judgmental space to ask questions about race and racism. And so those are just a few. If I could ask you to do anything, I would ask you to take a look at the Commit to Change Resource Hub, and to take a look at the Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. The very last person that had one of the conversations was Roger Goodell from the NFL. So I think that would be a very enlightening conversation to take a listen to. So that's the end of my spiel. Like I said, I hope you guys found it enlightening and learned a few things. And if I can answer any questions, please shoot them at me. I see that the chat has been busy. Or if there's just something you guys want to bounce off me, or like I said, anything you want to know, I'm here.
I have about 1,000 questions, but I'm going to just do one.
I got 1,000 answers.
To not take up everyone's time. So I've worked in advertising for the last decade and a half, and mostly in Omaha and in Chicago. And it seems, and I think I know the answer to this question, but it seems like a pretty, for lack of better words, white industry. Do you think that's fair? And if so, do you have an idea as to why that would be?
For a lot of what I just said here, I would say that retention is a big issue. When the most at first people would say that, oh, we want to hire Black talent or minority talent, we just don't know where to find them. That's literally what prompted the AAF to start the Most Promising Multicultural Student Program. So here is 50 of the nation's most talented. They've been vetted by your industry peers. Here's 50 of them, have at it. And so, but the problem is once you get them, getting them to stay. Because again, the work culture in some places is not one that's inclusive. And it's unfortunate because you can have a CEO with the best of intentions, and I know some of them. I know some of them personally because they are on the AAF board. You can have a CEO that has some of the best intentions, but these professionals aren't working with the CEO. They're working with managers. And if a manager has any type of bias, then that's who that person has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it can make their work life hell. And so instead of just sticking through it, they leave. And so there's this, that's a big part of the problem, retention. And so we've actually created, we have our Most Promising alumni group that has over almost 1,000 people that have gone through the program that would be at this point mid to senior level talent. And our partners are like, oh, we want to tap into them. We want to have access to them. And that's great and to have access and all, but if you're not creating a culture where these people feel comfortable, then they're not going to stay. So that's a part of the problem. I'm not going to say I guess, I know that's part of the problem.
Do you think there's an opportunity to attract more talent before, in high school? Like, is there
Good
anything that
question.
it does with that? Because I know.
We absolutely do. We have a program called Ad Camp. And Ad Camp is a camp designed for high school students to introduce them to advertising as a major in college and hopefully a professional career. Because when I can only speak from a Black perspective, but when our parents are talking to us about going to college and getting degrees, it's in more traditional fields like doctors, lawyers, educators, social workers, things like that. Nobody is saying, hey, why don't you try advertising? And so Ad Camp introduces high school students to the opportunities that exist within our industry. And so it's a week-long camp, and we give them a case study at the beginning of the camp. It's usually sponsored by an agency. And so the agency gives them a brief from an actual brand that they're working on. And so each day of the camp, the students learn about a different facet of advertising, whether it's strategy, creative, data and analytics, pitching 101. And so they're broken up into teams, like their own little mini agencies. And so at the end of the camp is their graduation, and each of the agencies or teams have to pitch their campaign. And the CEO, it's been in Atlanta for the past 3 years at 22 Square Agency. The CEO always attends, the staff attends, their family is there. And so it's always amazing to see the family's reactions, because they're like, wow, I didn't know my kid could do that. So we try to get them at a young age so that, it's already on their radar that, hey, there is an opportunity that exists for me within advertising. So yes, we were trying.
Hey, Ayanna, this is Ann Woodford. I'm the first vice president of AAF here in Omaha. One, after conversation, but two, I wanted to just kind of share some information about what our club is doing here in Omaha. And Terry and Daryl or anybody else from the board, I would love to. I might fumble this. I also have a fussy baby here in the office with me. So we locally, and I don't believe that Rod or Suzanne is on the call, but we recently completed an initiative called Advance Omaha, the Advance Omaha Fund, where basically, I think it was 11 or 12 of our local agency owners came together and made donations to this fund. And then the fund, we were able to provide funds to 4 local nonprofits. One of them is IB Black Girl. I think I saw that Jay Warren was on the call for a little bit. Culture House, 75 North, and Noise. And they all have very diverse program participants and missions. So now, obviously, donating funds to these nonprofits to help them out is great, but we also wanted to take it a step further and actually put some action behind it. Mm-hmm. So I know with IB Black Girl, Jay is working with Rod, who is one of our community outreach co-chairs. And they're gonna work on building out like a directory or a list of talent. So that way our local agencies, like, we're basically trying to connect everybody. Because like you said, we're trying to kind of get in front of our youth as they're younger, because mm-hmm. sometimes the opportunity just isn't there. So we're really trying to not only financially support some of the nonprofits in town, but also put some action steps in place where there's either job shadowing or a talent pool, just really trying to make those connections. I probably butchered that a little bit, but Terry, please jump in.
No, I think you did a great job, Ann, and Daryl might want to make a comment or two too before we wrap up. But the one thing that we want to drive home is that these are younger groups of people that we are hopefully making engagements with, so that that what is happening for them and not getting into our industry, that we mm-hmm. stop that gap needs to be stopped, and this is our way of creating those opportunities. so that they can learn more about our industry as well. Daryl?
No, you guys have covered it pretty well. I mean, really, it's just, a program, to kind of serve, kind of that diverse group of young individuals kind of seeking a path, and doing that through membership or mentorships and job shadows, offering us to come into their programs and also inviting them into ours, into the agencies, and allowing them to see, actual functioning working environments.
That's great. I always say you don't know what you don't know. And so, especially at a high school level, a lot of them don't know about our industry. And so when they attend the ag camp, most of them, I would say, want to continue, they want to continue in the field. But some of them say, it was cool to do for a week during the summer, but this isn't quite for me, and that's okay. But at least you know that this opportunity exists. It was so funny. We had a young man. We posted the camps in DC, Atlanta, Chicago, and New York. And I'm happy to say that we are rolling out a toolkit for the ag clubs so that they can host their own ag camps. But when we had it in DC, there was a young man that came up from Atlanta who, even though we were having one in Atlanta, it wasn't working within his time frame. So he came up to DC to attend ag camp. But this kid wanted to be a dentist. And so I had to ask him, what are you doing in an advertising camp? He's like, well, I want to own my own practice and I need to know how to market myself. I was like, man, these kids are smart. I even thought, are you kidding me? He looked like a little 12-year-old businessman. He came every day with his button down and his bow tie. And I'm like, you came from Atlanta to go to an advertising camp so that you could know how to market yourself as a dentist. Just mind blown. So yes, we're trying to get them at a young age. So kudos to you guys for what you're doing with your initiatives.
Thanks, Ayanna.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I'm over time.
No, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to wrap for Jenny. She had to drop off the Zoom. We do have a couple of upcoming events. One is on next Thursday on September 24th. It's our Ad Reads Virtual Book Club, and you can find information about the book that we're reading this month, Delusions of Grandeur, on our website and sign up. You don't have to read the book, but if you want to be a good part of the discussion, please do read it and join us for our happy hour on the 24th. We also have our partners from Centro, our elite sponsors, have a webinar on September 30th, and I added that information to our website. You can join that Zoom if you would like to. And then on October 20th, we'll be welcoming Ryan Horn from Bullhorn Communications. He'll give us an entertaining look at political handicapping. It's pretty perfect time to have this on October the 20th. Ryan's an AF Omaha member, has been for a number of years, and he's helped us with legislative issues throughout the years. So he'll be a great presenter for that October 20th event. Our special events team is working on several virtual events that are going to be happening this fall. So check your emails for invitations to those upcoming events. And I think that, Erin, did you have anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, I don't think so. But Ayanna, obviously you can see in the chat over here that everyone was loving the discussion. So anytime you want to come back to Omaha virtually or in person, we'd love to have you because this has been so helpful.
Thank you guys so much. This is the first conversation I've had that was like this, so I honestly didn't know how it was going to go over. So I appreciate you listening to me, and I hope you got something out of it. It seems like you did. And if you have any questions, I will my email, Addie, in the chat. Feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Thanks.
Take care. Be safe.
Take care. Happy birthday to your mom.
Thank you.